Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Nisan and today we're talking about adding hand embroidered details to your me-mates. Adding hand embroidery to my clothing is one of my favorite ways to customize my clothes. I was doing it way before I started sewing. I think maybe we can insert some photos of my very old amateur projects here. But after I started sewing, I realized just how much more I can do with hand embroidery, because when you're hand embroidering your me-mate, you really can sort of pose in the middle of the construction process and add more details and make it even more professional and custom looking. So today I just want to give you like an introductory video into the world of hand embroidery. I am by no means an expert when it comes to embroidery, but I really like doing it. And I think there's something really fun about sort of trying something new, being empowered to start and not having a super perfectionist mindset when it comes to something like this. So I'm just going to take you over the materials you'll need, two very simple stitches you can do to start, a few different ideas of designs you can use, and also a little sort of starter into which points in the construction process would be best to pose and add your embroidered details. So obviously you're going to need fabric is the first thing you'll need. In my experience, tighter woven fabrics do a little better, especially for beginners. I will say that like lightweight linens are a little trickier to embroider, so I have a few examples for you. You might have seen this Alice dress that I embroidered. I have a blog post all about it in our blog, so feel free to check that out. I feel like it's a good place to start if you're considering adding hand embroidery to your me-mates. But yeah, this is made on the lightweight European linen from Core Fabrics. Beautiful, fine fabric, but this is, I think, the finest I would go, because the needle does leave some little holes, and I feel sort of nervous in finer fabrics because I feel like it's compromising the integrity of the fabric. This is what it looks like on the right side, and on the wrong side it just looks like a continuation of the design because of the stitch I used. We'll go over the stitches in a minute, so yeah, this is one example. And then if you've seen our video on slow sewing, the famous tattooed shirt is back here. This is another linen that I used. This is much heavier weight, so I would say it's between a mid-weight to a heavier weight. And I think it handled the stitches much better. If you're just beginning, I would definitely recommend using something a bit more mid-weight, because it's much easier to work with, it doesn't stretch out of place, the stitches hold really nicely onto the fabric, so this is another example. My most recent project, and I'll finish this here with you today, so this is a Jenna shirt that I made using the silky poplin from Core Fabrics again. Honestly, like if you're just starting, I feel like this is the best place to start in terms of fabric, because it's really nice and tightly woven. It doesn't stretch out of place. You don't even have to use a hoop. You can just use the stabilizer I'm about to show you in a minute. And the stitches look really sort of crisp and nice on this really beautiful fabric. I would highly recommend starting here. So you might have realized that these are all woven fabrics. I also wanted to include a knit example. So I have this project that I will also finish here with you. This is the organic cotton French terry from, again, Core Fabrics. If you're thinking about adding embroidery to your knit garments, I would definitely consider starting with something with a lower stretch percentage, because if you're using a more stretchy fabric, then you would have to take into account how much it will stretch once you wear the garments. The embroidered stitches will restrict the movement of the fabric, so if you're adding a lot of embroidery on a specific part of the garment, it can sort of bunch up when you're wearing it or not look sort of as flat and nice as you might want it to look, unless you're very comfortable with figuring out that math and sort of trying it out, I would start with something more like a stable cotton jersey or a French terry like this. This is a delight to embroider, so I would highly recommend it. Now that you have your fabric selected, the next thing you will need is obviously some sort of thread or embroidery floss. I really like using just designated cotton embroidery floss. Usually comes in 6 strands, and you can divide the strands into much thinner quantity, so you can just use 1 strand or double it, triple it, depending on the thickness of the stitch you want to achieve. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Next, you're just going to need any pair of small scissors to trim your thread and trim your little tails after you've finished embroidering. You're going to need some hand sewing and embroidery needles. Honestly, I'm really not picky when it comes to hand sewing needles. As long as the eye is big enough for the floss to go through, I'm content to use whatever I like using to hand sew with. This is my current favorite. I think it's from Tulip. It has a large enough eye for the floss to go through, and it's quite long and thick enough for the French terry I'm currently working on. If you're using a finer fabric like the silky cotton poplin or a lightweight linen, I would match the thickness of the needle to the fabric so that it doesn't leave too big of a hole once you're done embroidering. Next up is honestly my secret weapon when it comes to adding hand embroidery to your garments. It's this water-soluble, sticky stabilizer that I really like. So what it is essentially, I'll show you a little close-up so you can get a feel of the texture. It's really papery on the right side, and it has a sticky sort of sticker-like back on the wrong side. You can transfer your designs onto this, peel this, stick it on your fabric, do whatever sort of embroidery you want to do, and then wash it, and the stabilizer completely dissolves and goes away, and you're left with your beautiful design on your fabric. This makes it really easy to transfer your designs onto the fabric and also add some stability to the fabric as you're working your embroidered stitches. So you don't really have to bother with stretching it on a hoop or sort of being worried about if the fabric is going to be able to support the stitches or not. This, perfect. So we have that. And then some additional but helpful little tools. I usually like keeping a bit of rubbing alcohol and a cotton pad or a piece of fabric with me if I'm using this sticky back stabilizer, because what happens when you're embroidering for a long time is the adhesive from the back of the stabilizer starts sort of coming off and rubbing onto your needle, and that makes it a little tricky to move your needle sort of gracefully through the fabric. It starts getting hung up on the fabric a little bit. So every, I don't know, 10 to 20 stitches, I rub my needle with a bit of alcohol to clean it and keep it fluid and nice. I also really like using my iPad or my phone for transferring the design onto the stabilizer. I usually just come up with whatever design I want to use for my embroidery and then put it on a Lightbox app on either one of my devices, which allows you to sort of lock the design into place, and you can just place your embroidery on the device and trace it with whatever pen you like, and then stick it on your fabric. Alternatively, if you're using this stuff, you can actually just print on it using any old home printer. So if you don't want to have to deal with tracing your design onto it manually, you can just print it. Or just use a window and put it up, put the design behind. Perfect. I also want to talk a little bit about where to get inspiration for your embroidery designs. Amy recently brought in these beautiful, beautiful designs, design booklets and embroidery transfers from the 1920s. And I'm completely obsessed. They are so precious. It's this sheet of tissue paper that has all these designs on it. And you're actually meant to just iron this on the fabric you want to embroider, and it leaves like teeny tiny dots of the sort of the guidelines of the design that you want to embroider, and then you can go ahead and embroider over it. It's really high tech for 1920s, and it's really fun to see how far the technology of hand embroidery has come, but also how much it stayed the same. Because essentially, if you buy like an embroidery transfer pack today, this is essentially the same thing as that, but it's really charming to see that it survived from the 1920s. This was my favorite tissue out of the whole collection, and I think you'll see why in a moment. So it has all of these teeny tiny animals. I'm particularly obsessed with the little monkeys and the cute little grumpy cat here. And this is sort of what inspired me to make the Jenna shirt that I'm about to show you. So I wanted to make a really sort of clean, classic, like crisp white shirt, but add all of these mischievous little monkeys all over it. So you'll see the monkeys again in a second. But because I didn't want to destroy these, they're so precious, like I didn't want to, I was too scared to use them in the way that they were intended to be used. What I did was I took some photos of the designs that I wanted to use, and I used my phone as a light box and traced it onto the water-soluble like stabilizer that I like to use. And then I was able to place the monkeys wherever I wanted on the shirt. I have a little example for you here. This is the one that I saved so that we can do it on camera. I think we can maybe start with the Jenna shirt, and I can take you through my process and one of the two stitches that I will show you today, which is a stem stitch. Now that you have a general idea of the materials, where you can get inspiration, I want to talk a little bit about why it is so much fun to add hand embroidery to your me-mates rather than your ready-to-wear clothing. What this process allows is to basically pause in the middle of construction and add unique little details that you wouldn't be really able to add if the garment was already sewn together. So I made this Jenna shirt, with a few examples of such tips so that I can share some ideas with you. So first off, we have this little patch pocket, and I embroidered this little monkey over it that's like sewing the patch pocket. For something like this, you would basically press your pocket into place. I like basting around it so that the seam allowances stay folded as I'm working on the embroidery. And then you would apply your transfer onto the pocket, stitch it, and then you can place it on the front panel of the shirt and top stitch it into place. So this would be a good example of like, before you start doing anything else, just pressing your piece and adding your embroidery onto it. On the back yoke here, I have another little monkey friend. For something like this, I knew that I wanted the monkey to go over the back yoke and slightly onto the back panel of the shirt. So what I did is I sewed the yoke to the back panel, did all of the like pressing and trimming and grading of the seams. And once I had these two pieces connected, I only embroidered through the outer back yoke and the back panel. And that allows the inside of the shirt to look really clean, because the stitches only go through the outer yoke and just a little bit on the back panel of the shirt. And once you put the inner yoke in its intended place, it hides all of your stitches and it looks really nice and clean on the inside of the shirt. So that's sort of like a, oh no, I'm sewing my shirt, I need to pause, embroider, and then come back sort of a moment. And for this one on the sleeve, on the hem of the sleeve, I essentially completed the entire sleeve construction, pressed the hem up, top stitched it into place, and then added the monkey as a very last sort of step. And this, I think, like, is the most approachable way to start doing it, because you can actually just do it on your existing me-mates or your ready-to-wear clothing. You don't have to pose in the middle of the construction. But yeah, it was a really fun little addition. So those are 3 little details that I really liked on this shirt. I have another example to show you from a past project. One of my other favorite places to add embroidery to is really wide belt loops, because it's sort of an unexpected detail, and it's really nice to see a little sort of friend or a little lettering on a belt loop. For this pair of trousers, I made one really wide belt loop and then satin stitched this little toy mouse onto it. And this, again, I did before putting anything together. So I essentially just had a rectangle of fabric. I folded the seam allowances in and then pressed them open again, just so I would have a guideline of the borders of the finished belt loop. Embroidered it, pressed it into place, and then top stitched it at the very end. So this, again, like, you would have to think a little bit in advance if you want to put something like this on your belt loop, because it's really hard to maneuver your way around such a small loop. Now I just want to show you 2 different outline stitches that I frequently use when I'm adding hand embroidery to my garments. One of them is called a stem stitch, also sometimes called a chain stitch. The other one is called a back stitch. They are both very, very simple to do, nothing scary. I know that like satin stitches and like more filled in sort of shapes can be a little trickier to master. I'm by no means an expert on those, but I really like how sort of approachable and fun and like honestly quick it is to add little outlines of either figures or lettering onto your projects. For this sample, I want to add my last little monkey friend at the back of the shirt near the hem. So I already transferred my design onto the stabilizer. I'll just peel away the backing, which leaves you with a sticky side. Place it where I want. Let's go right here. Press it nicely into place. And I would also recommend pressing your fabric before you do this so that you don't trap any accidental creases under the stabilizer and then stitch them into place. I'll also show you a little close-up of how the stabilizer looks on the fabric, so you can barely see it there. It's quite fabric-like. And then once we have that guy in place, it's time to prepare the floss. So whenever you're hand embroidering or hand sewing, it's sort of important to keep your thread not too long, because it's really frustrating to get it tangled up as you're working on your project. So I like to keep it like from the tip of my hand to my elbow when it's doubled over like this. So I think something like this length would work really well. And then, as I mentioned, most embroidery floss comes in a 6-stranded sort of twist. If you sort of untwist the floss a little, you can actually see the individual threads that make up the floss. And you can, again, like separate it into whatever thickness you would like to use. For this project, I was using 2 little strands at a time. I will show you the proper way, and I will also show you the quick way of doing this. So the proper way involves just picking a single strand and then pulling it out of the bunch, and then repeating that for however many strands you want to use at once, and then like bundling them up together again. What I like to do is a little rogue, but I think it goes much faster. I separate the 2 strands that I want to use here. I hold on to the rest of the floss here. I put some tension on it and I just glide my finger down, keeping it sort of separate so that it doesn't twist back onto itself. And if you put enough tension on it, it sort of prevents any tangles that may occur. And voila, you have 2 strands here and the rest of the floss here. So before you start embroidering, it's a good idea to take a look at your design and figure out which path you want to take across the design. You want to keep your stitches in a continuous line as much as possible so that there are no big strands of floss floating between the places you jumped between. So for this little monkey, I want to start at the base of the neck and go down its back and then do a little bit of the tail. And I'll use a stem stitch here so that it looks like a continuous line of sort of stitching, and it looks a little more sketchy and sort of more organic compared to a back stitch. So we'll go from the back of the fabric to the right side, up, and then rotate your project so that you're always sewing from the right-hand side to the left-hand side. If you're left-handed, you might want to reverse these directions. So we take our first stitch from the right side of the point of entry to the left side. Creating our first stitch. And then for the next stitch, you go directly through the middle of the existing stitch to the wrong side of the fabric, and then come up a little ahead of your first point. So you can see the second little stitch being formed here. And then pull. Again, back through the middle of the existing stitch, to your previous one. And then back up a little further ahead. So this is one way to do it. There is another way that I actually prefer, because if you take a look at the back, you will see a sort of a thick continuous line of stitching at the back of the fabric if you do it this way. And for some projects, like for the embroidered Alice dress, I think it looks really nice because it adds sort of like a more substantial line on both sides of the fabric, so that if you see it open, it sort of looks like a continuation of the design. It looks a little more intentional. But I will say that this uses up more floss. So if you want to sort of preserve on your thread a little bit, instead of going back through your previous stitch from the right side to the wrong side, you can actually do the reverse. So I'll just set up another little example of that so that I can show you. So you start with a single back stitch, and then instead of coming up after that stitch, you come up directly in the center of your previous stitch from the wrong side to the right side, like this. And then form your next stitch. Again, from the wrong side to the right side, directly in the middle of your previous stitch, and then take another stitch forward. With this technique, you do need to sort of stop and start a little more. You can't do one fluid motion to create your two little stitches at once, but it does use much less thread, and you might think that it also looks cleaner on the wrong side of the project. I'll work a couple more stitches here so that I can show you the difference between the two. So if you take a look at the back, you can see that this first portion is the one I stitched from the right side to the wrong side, and the second portion, which looks like running stitches at the back, is the one I stitched from the wrong side to the right side when I'm coming up in the middle of the stitch. And when it's done, let's find an example. Just When it's done, it just looks like tiny little running stitches, tiny little dots, sort of running across your fabric, rather than one really thick continuous line of stitching. And on the right side, it's just one continuous line of stitching. The second stitch I really like to use is a back stitch, and you can see more examples of it on the tattooed shirt. With this stitch, you essentially have tiny little stitches that follow each other really closely instead of overlapping on top of one another. This makes it much easier to achieve really sharp corners, and also I find it easier to achieve smooth curves with this stitch, but it can look a little more choppy and sort of more piecey. But I think it's a really nice choice for, especially for smaller scale projects, because with the stem stitch, you can't really make too sharp of a turn, or you're gonna start seeing the two strands of embroidery floss going in different ways. So if you really wanna get some like teeny tiny details onto your project, I would maybe recommend starting with a back stitch. Okay, so now that you have the stem stitch, I also want to teach you how to do the back stitch. Even easier than the stem stitch, so if you got that, you will have no problems with this guy. For the back stitch, I have this little lettering example for you. I really like using a back stitch for lettering projects because often you have really sharp corners and really sharp turns when you're doing little letters. And this stitch really allows you to get in there and really achieve small details very precisely. So for this project, what we'll do is, again, start with a knot, whichever way you prefer to do it, and then come up from the wrong side to the right side of the project, and create your first stitch by going down, and then coming back up like so. And then pull. And for your next stitch, you will go from the right side to the wrong side, exactly at the point where the previous stitch ends. So you will see a little hole left by the previous stitch. You will go in and then come up where you want your next stitch to end, like this. And then pull. Go in, come up. Be careful not to create accidental knots, so you always want the loop to be out of the way of your needle when you're pulling tight. Like so. And then again, in and out. Then pull it tight. You can also take a moment to sort of arrange the individual strands of floss in the way you like them when you're doing this. So for example, right now I'm using 3 strands of floss in one. And if I form my next stitch, if I find that the tension is too loose, I can sort of gently tug on them. And if I, like, for example, I can see that one of the strands is looser than the other ones here. So I can isolate that one, which I think is this one, and give it a little tug so that they all lie really flat against the fabric. After you've finished your design, you go back to the wrong side and don't come up again. You just leave your needle on the wrong side. And then find the float closest to it, go under. You will see this little loop forming. Go with your needle through the loop. Give it a gentle tug to create a little knot. You can do this as many times as you want. I usually find that it's okay with just a single knot because the strand is so thin. And then what I like to do is sort of weave my thread tail through the back of the stitches for just like 3 or 4 stitches. And then trim it off really close. What this allows for is the tail of the thread continues along the design. So if you're using a more transparent fabric like a white poplin or a white linen, you don't see a rogue tail just hanging out in the middle of your project. It sort of like follows the design and you don't see it on the right side of the project. Obviously, it doesn't matter for something like this, but if you're using a more transparent fabric, it's nice to keep that in mind. So once you're done embroidering, adding all of your stitches and decorations, whatever else you want to add, it's time to remove the stabilizer to reveal your final project. What I like to do is fill a tub with lukewarm water. Depending on the care instructions of your fabric, you might want to adjust this, but I really like sort of using like a warm-ish water temperature to remove the stabilizer more efficiently. I fill up a tub with warm water, add a tiny bit of laundry detergent into it, and then submerge my entire project in the water. I give it a few minutes, and then I gently agitate the section with the stabilizer to help it dissolve a little faster. Once you feel like there's not a huge amount of residue between your stitches, it is going to feel a little sticky at this point, but like you will see that there is a difference between the stabilizer being fully on and it being mostly dissolved. Once you feel like there's a small amount of residue left, I just throw it in the washing machine, wash the garments based on the care instructions of the fabric, and then throw it in the dryer. I would really recommend taking it out of the dryer when it's slightly damp and giving it a good press with lots of steam, because that really helps to lock in the stitches in the position that you want them to play in. You can also just put your finished product in the washer without doing the submersion technique, but I really like doing it because for the tattooed shirt, for something so heavily embroidered, I didn't know about sort of putting it in water and like waiting for it to dissolve before putting it in the washer. And I found that I had to wash it a few times, like I think 2 or 3 times before I felt the fabric reverting back to its really soft and like nice state. Depending on the brand of stabilizer you get, you might find that it leaves more of a residue or it washes away really quickly. I've been really lucky and like happy with this one that I got here. But yeah, you might want to experiment on a little scrap piece of paper, scrap piece of fabric before you do your entire project. And also it is and always a good idea to sort of test these sorts of products on a little piece of fabric before you do the entire thing, because you never know if the fabric you're using is going to agree with the adhesive or if it's going to have a hard time sort of getting clean after you're done embroidering. So test first so that you don't cry later. I really like adding embroidery to my sort of more special garments because I feel like it really adds like a custom touch and it sort of infuses the piece with so much meaning. And it can be like a secret little nod to your favorite sort of pop culture reference or a meaningful memory. For example, this little mouse that I showed earlier. So this is a pair of trousers that I made in memory of one of my old cats that passed away. And this was his favorite sort of toy to play with, his little mouse. So I really liked adding this secret little detail to remind me of him and think about it every time I wear it. It also has his name embroidered in the back as a little label. So you can really have a think about what you want to infuse your me-mates with. I think it's really special to pour so much love and time into a piece and then to be able to just wear it out and about and sort of carry your beautiful work with you in your daily adventures. Same with the tattooed shirt. Like, I'm sure you can tell how excited I am about this piece by just how many times I've worn it and how much I like to talk about it. But yeah, it has little references to all of my favorite things. So little animals, monkeys, a little log for the log lady from Twin Peaks, a little note to hand sewing with a little hand sewing motif, a ghost, so many things. You can really get inspired by anything you see around you. You can use any photo, any sort of lettering, pull things from vintage magazines, vintage embroidery transfers, and yeah, I would really encourage you to take a critical and open eye to the stuff you see around you every single day, and maybe transfer some of them onto your everyday clothes to make them even more special. I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions about how to do any of the techniques, any of the materials, when it would be best to add embroidery to a very specific pattern or garment, I would be delighted to help you in the comments. Yeah, like, share, subscribe, and see you next week for another video.